Welcome to Unit 16 and the appraisal. The appraisal section we're going to cover today. Because we talked about earlier in the financing section, the number of houses that are actually owned is like 67%, and of those 67%, 85% of those are financed. And we talked about that in the finance section. Well, those same amount of numbers traditionally have to be appraised. So you can see the large amount of appraisals that actually go on day to day. So you guys have to have knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals of how appraisals work. We're going to go through that today and cover 3 or 4 different ways that appraisers use a valuation to determine value. We're going to cover broker price opinions, we're going to cover the comps or CMAs, and we're going to cover the actual true 1004 appraisal, all right? We're going to talk about some of the concepts that the appraiser has to think through when he's doing the property. We're going to differentiate between these 2 words up until now that we haven't really used, but today we're going to divide the word value and price and talk about which one's which and how you determine which one is the best. And then there's 3 valuation approaches. We're going to go through all 3 of these. All right? So starting on page 302, we're going to talk about appraisers and appraisals. This has got my favorite story in it, true story that you'll love here in a minute. Maybe that'll cheer me up today. It'll cheer you guys up. I know it's always good for a laugh when I think about it. What happened? So the first thing we need to get started is an appraisal is an opinion of an educated person that is trained in such a manner to give that opinion. All right? So it's an opinion of value. These appraisers are often seen as the smartest ones in the group because they have to go through many, many, many hours of training, and they have to, just like us, do an apprenticeship under somebody before they can actually go out and start their own. Their class is like, I can't remember, 100 hours. Then they have to do 2,000 hours of appraisal. Now, that's 2,000 hours of appraising. That doesn't count the hour to the drive time or the 10 minutes that they're talking. It's 2,000 hours. It usually takes most of them 2 to 3 years, some of them longer to get this 2,000 hours in. All right? So it's an educated opinion by an opinion by an educated person, okay? They have gone through several different training classes. There's this thing called Title 11 of the Financial Institution Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act, or FIREA. All right? FIREA requires that all appraisals have to be used on a federally backed loan or a federally related loan. So basically what they're saying is, if it's a HUD home, misspoke, FHA or VA or any of the banks are doing these loans, they're all federally backed. FIREA requires that this appraisal be in place. There are a couple different entities that the appraiser has to use, and we're going to go through some of this. For instance, over at the top, the Appraiser Qualification Board is the board that says, here's what they're educated in. Now think about this. Whatever state they go to, they all are educated in the exact same manner, so that they should come up with the exact same answer across the board. One of the things that was always amazed to me when I was in the corporate world, and maybe you guys don't know this, I was in a corporate world. We were a tier 1 supplier for the automotive industry. I had 14 plants under my control in 9 different states. Of those 14 plants, 5 of them painted cars. Now, that they didn't paint the entire car. Byrne, Indiana painted the hoods. And what was cool is they could paint a hood on Byrne, Indiana, and the fenders in Sacramento, California, and it be the exact same color. To the point is where you guys never even don't even know that. I mean, that quality control between those painters and all that was amazing. We had $1 million paint room that had 30 different types of lights. We had fluorescent lights, they had sunlight, they had, all these so that they could all look the same. This is exactly what appraisers do. The appraiser trained in Maine gets the same education as the appraiser trained in Arizona. That way they can always come up with the same answer so the bank can rely upon them. And they do that by following this thing called USPAP, the Uniform Standards of a Professional Appraisal Practice. All right? USPAP is think of it like the flow chart or the outline, and they follow the outline. They do this first. They determine what's the job. Is it an appraisal? Not all appraisals are the same. Is it an acquisition appraisal or is it a refinance appraisal? They're done differently. So they need to state first thing we do is decide what we're doing. Is it an appraisal on an investment property or is it an appraisal on an owner-occupied home? So USPAP is the outline that everybody follows, all right? Now on page 303, you can see there are many organizations for appraisers. Once again, there is no question to my knowledge that says this abbreviation means what, as for a test. So that section's a big woo, hey, don't worry about it. Okay? So what I'm telling you is this. An appraiser gives you a value. He does that through an appraisal. He will come back and tell you that the value of this property is $150,000 house. Remember, it's an opinion of an educated person. However, many banks act like it's handed down from the burning bush. All right? Supposed to be an opinion. They give a value. You, as an agent, will do this other thing that we call a CMA, which stands for a comparative market analysis. Or what do you think we call it? What's the most common thing we call it? The comps. They're going to pull the comps. So when your listing client calls you up and says, hey, Lydia, I want you to list my house. Can you tell me what the value is? Sure. Let me do my comps, and I will get back to you. The big thing to remember with the comps is that it is a range of values. You call your client back, and you say, hey, I looked at some of the old sold listings. I looked at some of the current listings. I looked at some of the expired listings. And based on my opinion, your house is worth somewhere between $154,000 and $159,000. You cannot come back with a value. That's an appraisal. You come back with a range between $154,000 and $159,000 based on the comps. That is our big thing. The good thing about that, and we've talked before, is that a listing agreement, a listing appointment where they sign the listing agreement is a planned thing. So they'll call you and say, hey, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, I'd like to talk to you. Can you meet me at the house? Sure. Now you've got time to go out and pull these comps and look at them. The thing I will tell you with comps, and this is my big gripe, if you are a numbers person like myself, this sucks. because comps are an art. All right, and you're going to see what I mean here in a minute. It is not a science. And the more comps you pull, the better you become at doing it. It is not a science. There is no way to look at a house and go, well, that's $100 a square foot, and it's that, so it's $400,000. Can't do that. It's an art. All right? So it's not an appraisal. Now, in the near recent future, banks have become lazy. And a lot of times when a bank needs to either decide if they're going to foreclose, remember back we talked about a short sale? And I said the bank is going to take short of what's owed, and you basically have to prove you can apply for the loan, and the house doesn't have a value. How they get that is right here. All right? So the banks have invented this new concept called a broker's price opinion. Broker's price opinion. It's a very watered down version of a CMA, and there are two versions of it actually. There's one called a drive-by, and there's one called an interior. The drive-by, you just drive by the house, you take a picture of the outside, picture of the street. The interior, you actually go in the house. They have provided you access to the house either through the owner that's living there or through, they'll send you keys or a code, and you literally go in the house and take pictures of damages and stuff like that. So the interior is obviously more in depth. They pay anywhere from $45 to $75 for you to do this, all right? It's called a broker's price opinion. Banks use it for potential foreclosures. They may do it for a refinance. There are several reasons banks do BPOs. But literally what they're doing is this. They are shortcutting the system by hiring a realtor to give a value. All right? So listen to what I'm telling you. Typically, appraisers do an appraisal to give a value. Realtors do a CMA to give a range. This BPO is kind of a hybrid because the bank doesn't want to pay for a full-blown appraisal. So they hire a broker to do basically a CMA, and then the very last question is, in your opinion, what's the value? And it's called a broker's price opinion. So in this particular situation, we do come up with a value. It's not an appraisal. It's an opinion, which is what an appraisal is, but it's an opinion of an educated person. We are not educated in the ways of appraisals, okay? So it's an uneducated opinion of that. Fannie Mae, like I said, if Fannie Mae owns the loans, they may use them for short sales or deeding. If someone says, I want to deed the property back to you in lieu of foreclosure, the bank wants to know what's the value of the asset. They're going to call Raymond and say, hey, we'll give you $55 to go do this appraisal or this interior. In the heyday, 08, 09, 11, my wife did nothing but appraisals. Misspoke. Did nothing but BPOs. And she was doing them to the tune of like 50 a week because there were so many foreclosures going on. The banks were literally handing us, calling us and saying, we've got a group of 20, do you want them? We got a group of 15, do you want them? And she was making anywhere from $45 to $75 a pop on these. She literally didn't broker at all. She spent 40 hours a week behind the computer doing this. She'd spend one whole day mapping these 20 properties and leave for the day and take her camera and go out and just drive to Indianapolis, this really weird route, and come back and go, okay, I got all the pictures. Now, tomorrow I'm going to sit all day and download the picture, all that. It got to be a game with us where we started doing all these interiors because people were in the foreclosure and had moved out. So they'd call and say, hey, $75, you want to do an interior. We used to call it going shopping because people would move out of these houses and leave stuff. So we had a contest, who could find the best stuff? You know, we'd go in and split it up, like she'd do some of the rooms and I'd do the other pictures, or I'd do the outside. But we got to the point one day we got called up to do this one house that was a former funeral parlor. In the kitchen is the door on the floor to the cellar. I opened that door to look down the cellar, was a dirt floor, and went, nope, not me. Shut it. Said, I ain't going down there to take a chance of what I might find. So I'm doing this stuff, and in the kitchen cabinet, I opened one of the kitchen cabinets, going through to make sure all the personal property, because you got to tell the bank, hey, it's got to get cleaned out too. That's their next job. So that was what we reported. In the kitchen cabinet were 9 $5 bills. I have a $45 tip in this house. So I'm like, sweet. So I'm yelling at her. I'm like, hey, I win today. She calls me, goes, no, you don't. I said, what do you got? She said, come to the garage. So I went to the garage. In the garage was a pearl white 2008 Cadillac hearse still sitting in the garage with the keys in it. So I immediately call the bank. I'm like, hey, personal property has to be removed, right? They're like, yes, we want everything out. What do we do with it? He goes, I don't care. He said, give me an idea how much it is. I'll call a junk guy. They'll come and tow it away so we can start the process of getting it listed. I said, but you don't care where it goes. He's like, no, I don't. So I said, just for fun, I thought, well, I'll call a buddy of mine. And I'm like, hey, Joe, I found a Cadillac. He's like, yeah, because we all just find a Cadillac laying around. I'm like, I want this. Can you run a search for me? He's like, well, give me the VIN number. So I read the VIN number off of it, and he's like, oh, no, GMAC's looking for that. I said, well, it's in this. I've got it. It's in a garage. He's like, you do? I'm like, yeah. He goes, GMAC's got a bounty on it, $500. So he said, let me call my buddy at GMAC, and they'll come get it. Sure enough, they came and got it, sent us a check for $500. But I'd rather had the pearl white hearse. That would have been fun to drive around in. So she won that day, all right? So that is the BPO. So what you have is this appraisal, you have a CMA, and then you have a hybrid between the two called a broker's price opinion. They're all used for different things. Valuations used for the bank to tell them what the value of the collateral is. The CMA is the range of value you're going to give to your seller. And then this BPO is a cross that banks will use if they're trying to decide to foreclose or refinance or deed in lieu of foreclosure or any of those items where they need the value. Yeah, we know what the value was 5 years ago when we had it appraised. We just want to make sure it is. I got one right up near 16th and Arlington, which is the Naval Avionics. And I had the address was like, I can't remember, 1603. And I'm driving along looking, it was just an exterior picture. No, it was 1633. So I'm going through, looking at the house addresses real slow with my camera. 1629, 1637. Where did it go? 1633. Vacant lot. So there's a guy out raking the lawn. I'm like, yo, what happened? He's like, oh, that house? Crackheads burned it down 2 years ago. He said, matter of fact, it was so long ago, the city's already came and cleaned it up, and now it's a nice level lot. I'm like, how long? He said, 2 years ago, 18 months, I don't know, somewhere around there. Thanks, dude. So I call my contact. I'm like, hey, your house is now a vacant lot. And that guy started laughing. He's like, well, I guess that's what happens when you don't pay attention to your stuff. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, send in a receipt, and I'll go ahead and pay you for driving out there. So I said, well, that's cool. But I mean, it had been gone 2 years, and the bank didn't even know it. You think? I'm never surprised about some of the stuff that I see. All right, let's change audio files.